Kwame Venter, and I'm a member of the Defenders. We'd like to welcome y'all tonight to this event. This is our regularly scheduled monthly meeting. So we thank y'all for coming out. Today we have two very special guests. We're honored and delighted to have them here. One is a former colonel of the U.S. Army and state representative, Wright. Thank you for coming out.
Thank you.
And the other one is a Medea Benjamin, who is the co-founder of Code Paint. And I've seen some of her videos on YouTube, and I'd like to give her a thanks and a shout out for coming out also. Before we begin, we're going to do a few quick reports from some of the activists, advocates in this area. Give an update on some of the events that they've been a part of. And the first person we're going to invite to come up is Mr. Perry Hicks, and he's working with the Ashley Williams case. I don't know if y'all are familiar with it, but he's going to give us a brief update on it. Correct?
Investigator, and I work exclusively for Pauline Ewald, Esquire. She's taken on the Ashley Williams case pro bono, and is her attorney, contract attorney. The situation with that case right now is that Judge Taylor has received two verbal requests to have her own attorney, not a court-appointed attorney. At a couple of weeks ago, I believe it was April 18th, Judge Taylor denied her own attorney, saying that since the case started with court-appointed counsel, he would continue with court-appointed counsel. Now, everyone has a Sixth Amendment right to their own attorney. This is legally a fatal error on his part, and he should know better. But he has received a second verbal request, and now he has a motion for substitution before him, signed off on by the court-imposed counsel, Mr. Bowen. So at this point, the Judge Taylor has been very quiet this whole week. We haven't heard anything out of him, and I'm suspecting myself that he's probably going to try to delay making a decision because he really can't continue to flaunt the Constitution and its requirements for Ashley to have her own attorney. I can tell you, as an investigator looking into this case, this is not a lawyer trick about her innocence. The woman is absolutely innocent of starving her child to death. The child died from complications due to the George syndrome, which is not an infection. It's a genetic disorder. It has to do with the 12th chromosome. The child cannot thrive. The villi and the digestive tract die off. Nutrients cannot be absorbed, and so you have the appearance of, well, actually is malnutrition, not because you've not been feeding the child. This case has had so many irregularities to it, it's really shocking. They have tried to bump off Pauline's expert witnesses she gathered, including Dr. Cyril Weck. If you look him up, he's done tens of thousands of autopsies, consulted on tens of thousands of more. He is a regular consultant. I think it's the ABC News. I've seen him on other CNN. I've seen him on other channels as an expert about cases that are going to come up in these high-profile cases. So to deny him and say he's a quack or he doesn't have science is just absolutely outrageous. And that is exactly what the Richmond Free Press reported, that the first court-imposed counsel, Devica Davis, actually was asked by a reporter and said that the reason she did not put on a defense using Dr. Cyril Weck was that his opinion was not based on science. Just absolutely outrageous, absolutely outrageous. When that didn't work out as planned, they tried to substitute medical examiners with one that did not do the autopsy. Pauline destroyed him in cross-examination in a hearing having to do with child custody of her children. She has 3 perfectly healthy children that they took from her. She when that didn't go so well, then they tried to redact the autopsy that stated as the manner of death that it was undetermined as to what caused the baby to die. Now, you could fall off a ladder and crack your skull and die of head injuries, but that doesn't mean that you're murdered. It means you slipped off a ladder. So if you were going to try to prosecute somebody for murder and you had an autopsy that said that the deceased slipped off a ladder, and you redact out of that the fact that he slipped off a ladder and just left the cause of death as being a fractured skull, then you can make a jury believe that the individual was murdered. And that's exactly what they're trying to do. It's shocking and it's unnecessary. And we're seeing this with other cases. We're seeing this, the famous Culpeper case, the Hatch case, where Mr. Hatch was accused of murder and they had no evidence whatsoever. And so they just manufactured it out of whole cloth. And this sailed completely through Virginia's appellate system and was only overturned when it got to a federal court. And the judge there said, oh my God, you know, this is a travesty of justice. So coalitions like this are vitally important to keeping the courts in check and the prosecutors in check. Because in this state, you have no interlocutory appeals. You cannot go to a higher court and say, look, they're doing evil things down in this case. You have to wait until the case is over. And as the case with Mr. Hatch, he sat in jail 12 years, an innocent man, until it got to the federal courts. And of course, you know, these kind of things would bankrupt you. So without coalitions, without people coming together for justice, then, you know, we would have many, many more people. I at one time was a proponent of the death sentence. Not anymore. Not what I learned as a private investigator. I just do not trust the system to take someone's life. The last thing I would like to say is that Ashley's spirits are up. She was overwhelmed that the community was coming together to support her, the NAACP, the coalition. She was happy that Pauline had never given up on her case. And today, while she's sitting in the jail not far from here, she is in good spirits and is looking forward to the day that she's going to be released. And that is going to happen. It's a legal inevitability. It's just a matter of how long they want to drag this out. That's all I have.
Thank you. All right, so again, as the woman said, as mentioned, 30 people arrested on March 3rd in the Capitol steps at the Reproductive Rights Rally. You all may have heard of a little vaginal ultrasound bill that still went through in watered-down form a few days after we were arrested. But anyway, we were charged with unlawful assembly and trespassing. Unlawful assembly is being completely dropped, all of those charges. However, we're still charged with trespassing. And May 25th is our motion for dismissal. So we're going to ask the supporters in the community to come out to the courthouse. I think it's the Marshall building. It's the one that's on 920 Hall Street. So May 25th, we have to be there at 11 a.m., obviously showing up a little bit earlier, trying to pack the courthouse with supporters, and also maybe have people like line the sidewalks with some signs.
What street is Manchester Courthouse?
That's the Manchester, okay, yes. I'm not sure if the names, just go there, I just show them.
Marshall is Norfolk Drive.
Okay, in the Manchester Courthouse at 920 Hill Street. So, if y'all can make it.
Thank you.
For those of you that don't know, we celebrated May Day this past Tuesday. That's May 1st. May 1st is celebrated worldwide. It's International Workers' Day. It marks the kickoff in the United States in 1886 for the campaign for the 8-hour workday. And the reason that it became such a widespread celebrated holiday was the police attacked strikers on May 1st, and then there was a series of protests against police repression in the days that followed. And on May 4th, there was a very large one in Haymarket Square in Chicago. And this was largely organized by radicals, anarchists and communists, and radical trade unionists. And the police eventually attacked the crowd, and at some point, it's never been pinpointed who, someone threw a bomb and several police officers were killed, and that was used to justify a nationwide crackdown on militant workers. And what resulted from that was 8 known anarchist organizers being arrested and charged with conspiracy, even though almost all of them weren't even present at the rally that day. And a few of them were pardoned later on, but 5 of them, I believe, were sentenced to hang. One of them, he said in his suicide note, killed himself in his cell to deny the state the pleasure of executing him. The other 4 were hung. Several others were pardoned years later. And that case was used as a big rallying cry for workers, and it celebrated the world over, but not really celebrated as much in the United States, not in the numbers as in other countries, mostly because the powers that be have made it a point to try and erase that holiday from our history. But some people still keep it alive, and this was the 4th year in Richmond that we've done a parade and rally. But we had a series of 6 days where we had all sorts of other events that people could attend, and we had a few people just helping to coordinate. So we had different groups organizing different events around different class-related issues, whether it was gender in class or housing in class, and so on and so forth. So we had a direct action training that some people organized, Reframe, which is Richmond residents of public housing in Richmond against mass eviction. They did a teach-in about some issues facing them in this city. And we had several other events, just social events and political events, up until Tuesday when we had a march and rally, which the march was unpermitted, and we took the streets and marched all the way down Broad Street from about Harrison Street to 6th and Broad. And previous years we may have heard of us fighting for a permit. The reason we didn't go for one this year was because we denied the permit every time, and they've tried to force us to pay for police, which not only do we already pay taxes that pay the police to do things like that, but also we felt that we shouldn't have to pay police officers that were responsible in some way or form for the deaths of the people that we're supposed to be celebrating. So we marched anyway, and police officers still showed up and helped us block traffic. So that was basically what we did, and we're hoping that more people will get involved next year and more people will show up next year. So if you do want to help with that, or you want to talk to me about any of that stuff, you should come talk to me after this event is over. I'll stick around for a little bit. That's it.
Thank you to the defenders for once again convening us all for the most important discussions and to learn from one another about our struggles and to focus our attention on the most important issues, and for creating space at the beginning for different groups to share. I wanted to invite everyone to come to 2 upcoming Richmond Peace Education Center events. One is tomorrow at Richmond Friends Meeting, tomorrow Sunday at 12:30. And that's a discussion focused on the issue of torture. So it's a discussion focused on the issue of the unfinished issue of official U.S. involvement in torture. And there will be information about the likelihood of continuing torture happening in Afghanistan and Yemen. And that's an event that will be led by a North Carolina peace activist named Chuck Yeager, who works near Fort Bragg, North Carolina, which is an area that was implicated in some of the activities at Abu Ghraib, and who's been working for many years on the issue of torture. The second event is a larger event on May 24th at 7:15. That's a Thursday night, and that event is focused on Iran. It's a forum that we're calling Peace Perspectives on Iran, Why Military Intervention is Not the Answer. And there will be 3 really wonderful speakers, including David Swanson and 2 local professors, an Iranian professor from Virginia State University and a professor of history from Randolph-Macon. And the speakers will be challenging the myths about the Iran supposed crisis. So they will be addressing and challenging widely claimed but incorrect claims about Iran, including the idea that Iran has an active nuclear weapons program, the idea that Iran poses a direct threat to the United States, and the idea that military action would in any way be remotely effective. And it comes at a very important moment as the threat of war continues to escalate. And as the U.S. and the West is tightening the economic sanctions, threatening a fuel embargo in July, and this event will be held the day after the talks between the U.S. and the West and Iran takes place on May 23rd. So again, that's May 24th at 7:15, and it's at Ginter Park Presbyterian Church, which is a roadside church on Seminary Avenue. It's 1 block south of Laburnum on Seminary. And I really hope everyone comes. I have some little flyers that I put over there. Thank you.
Normally, I have to, in my role as the host organization, say welcome to Williamsburg Community House, and I'm actually still surprised that they're okay with all these meetings. I need to thank them also. And then to remind you that the Birdhouse Farmers Market is now open. The season has begun, so Tuesdays from 3:30 to 7. Please come shop and eat well.
Think global, eat local.
There you go.
Wherever that.
And 2 housekeeping points are that when you go out, back out that door immediately to the right, there is 1 bathroom, and then there's a little hallway after that, and there's another bathroom there. And if you are thirsty, there is one of those sort of mechanical plugged into the plumbing system water coolers just on the left through that door as well. Most of you do know me as a member of the Defenders, and in 2005 I also became part of an organization called the Virginia Friends of Mali, and it is one of those citizen diplomacy organizations that facilitated a sister city relationship between Richmond and Ségou, which is the 2nd largest city in Mali. At the moment, factors not too much in what's going on over there, probably because it's sort of centrally located between Bamako, the capital city, and the northern region where Timbuktu and Gao and Kidal, which is much further north, are in the country. It's actually very difficult to make a short statement on what's going on in Mali, and I don't even know how many people know where Mali is, and whenever I usually initially bring it up, somebody says Mali who? So it's not M-O-L-L-Y, it's M-A-L-I. It's in West Africa, and if you're familiar at all with the island of Gorée, people talk a lot about that in terms of its role in the slave trade. The country that it belongs to, even though it's an island, it is Senegal, and Senegal is right on the coast, and Mali is just in from that. Mali, however, is very large. I think I sort of subjectively figured out that 13 Virginians would fit into the nation of Mali. It's probably a little more than that. The bulk of the country is in the Sahel and Sahara region. The part where most of the cities are involve the Niger River. When the Tuareg people rebelled and in this instance decided that they needed a land base, they have claimed the entire northern part of Mali, including the upper regions of the Niger River. And so that includes the cities that you've heard about, which principally are, again, Kidal in the far north, but Timbuktu on the river and Gao on the river, and a little further down, almost as far as Mopti, which is a major port city. Mali is landlocked, and because it straddles the desert the way that it does, it is subject to the problems of a growing desert. So one of the older dynamics for that area is that the desert is growing, and food is harder and harder and harder to come by. Maintaining any kind of sort of nation state in a region like that is very difficult. Mali's central government has traditionally had a very difficult time maintaining that border. I could not possibly get into why the borders are the way they are right now, and why, even though we understand the word or the responsible term is colonial, the next layer becomes what happened at independence and why certain decisions were made, and why the Tuareg were left out of those processes, and why we have the conflicts that we have right now within that nation. Right now, the conditions are that it's still very unstable. The country of Mali is being threatened with intervention by ECOWAS, which is a 15-nation intergovernmental body, which set itself up to be a vehicle for development, and then later added a military arm to it. It is, has a close relationship to the United States, and so ECOWAS is meeting with the United States and with, I believe, Great Britain and France in these talks that are going on right now. And as things stand right now, they are, of course, saying that unless the transition plan that they drafted goes into effect in the way and in the time frame that they have described, they have 3,000 troops ready to land in Mali. The challenge that is the real problem is that dealing with one issue does not deal with the other. And ECOWAS sending in 3,000 troops will further destabilize the nation and do nothing to address the grievances of the people in the north. The Tuareg on the one hand are an oppressed people with the right to self-determination and the right to claim a landmass. On the other hand, they're only 10% of the population in northern Mali in terms of ethnic groups. So that's another dynamic that has to be worked out. It is not simply a matter of light-skinned Arab people or Berber people versus dark-skinned African people, because if you look at any of the photographs, you will see that the Tuareg really have as wide a representation in that dynamic as do Malians in the south. But there are traditional relationships and traditional tensions. So it's a very complicated situation, and we almost have to come back to the position that we also talk about with Iran, in that how you weigh in on what's going on internally in Mali would be very foolish without an awful lot of information and some very direct relationships with people. What we can do as activists is keep ourselves abreast of what's going on and do as much of that as we can, but really, again, emphasize the fact that at the very least, the U.S. needs to keep its hands off of Mali and out of the dynamics by which Mali people can address the challenges that they face. And it's not going to be easy, and I'm, at this moment, not terribly hopeful. But we really do need to keep an eye on it, because I think the next layer of this is that if Mali falls, we're probably looking at the place where AFRICOM could establish a base of operations, and then we are looking at one of the most significant shifts in power relationships in Africa since independence. I did make copies of a map of Africa. There are 40 of them up there. I would ask that each of you take one and start to get to know the continent of Africa. Oil plays into this, obviously. Geopolitical positioning for control of the world's resources is a part of this whole story. So, thank you.